Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert, and I'll be your guide on this meditation practice that enters a space of mindfulness through the act of drawing. This week, we'll explore the edge of things, the characters of that edge, the way a line that separates two spaces on a page, two empty zones, can be articulated to give it physical presence, to begin to seem as if it's describing where one material becomes nothing, where light goes to dark, where soft transitions into hard surface. There are many techniques for this. We'll do it very lightly and very loosely, a way of giving character, surface, shape to the edge through contouring, through layering of line, through explicit description, and a little bit of marking and shading of texture. I'll work back and forth between pen and pencil, right? Something to give crisp, solid, smooth edges with that pen, and something to fill in the background, the space on the other side. That pencil that gives hard and soft at the same time, light and dark to the composition. Probably by the time this goes out, the exhibition will be over, but you can always find images online. Recently visited the Paul Rudolph drawing exhibition at the Met here in New York, and while going through that, which is all very interesting and drawing, and actually a nice example of ways of approaching the edge, architecture, all about where one material meets another to form space, and the drawings, communicating that in a way that helps someone believe and imagine what that architecture will be like. His drawings are exquisite examples of careful control of hatch, cross-directional line, light and dark emerging from the boundaries of the material world. But just outside of that room, always, or at least usually on display, is a series of paintings by George O'Keeffe, another wonderful master at interpreting and translating edge, both through the abstraction of form and to the presence of something represented there that we all can share in recognition. So if you have a museum of any kind near where you are, art, architecture, design, history, spend some time there looking for things that inspire and bring more to your repertoire of stuff seen, which always informs stuff imagined through this act of drawing. The more you can bring to your imagination, the more you might find ways to it out there on the page. But whatever you'd like to draw with, anything will work. So go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. George O'Keeffe drawing or paintings. And so I think that'll be our slight inspiration here. What I saw looking at some of those, especially the bone type of paintings, was different treatments of an edge. So they're really just some shapes and figures with a foreground and background, but the way the edge is treated brings them out as something we see. So we'll take that as our guiding place, but otherwise they won't be as good as that, unfortunately. Just be some shapes and some different ways of thinking about the edge. To warm up, we'll bring that to mind, right? An edge could be kind of anything. Just a line by itself, maybe a crease, doesn't necessarily denote the edge of one thing or the other. But if that line creates a shape, for instance, by going to the size of the paper there, then we have a place that's separate from another place. Could be just a figure in the page that has inside and outside. It can be a little combination of the two that start to physically describe the transition from one thing to another. So as we go through the exercise, if you want to do more linear things or more curvy things, that's all fine. It'll just be edges to consider how we see them. An edge could be defined in many ways, by many more than we'll get to. One could be just by giving it a little bit of character through your instrument, whether it's pen or pencil, bringing some thickness and differentiation to one side or the other, just to give it a little prominence or heaviness. Another way might be through contouring or layering, bringing an edge out, giving it more space on the page, kind of repeating itself and slowly fading into another surface. Could be beveled, have a clear cut line somewhere, and a clear cut line somewhere else. And that might be shown with some kind of striation or marking to give a little indication of direction from one thing to another. And I might also round it, show parts of the surface unseen, come back with a little bit of emphasis to them. And if you have a pencil or pen, you might do it through shading an edge starting a little dark as the light disappears and transitioning out to something lighter, or vice versa, the light glinting off of the edge from a darker place. So all of these could be open to us as we play and explore edge conditions in the larger drawing format. And as we transition from a page of scrap or warm up that you can play with throughout the exercise, all edges could be something we engage with as you move along, but think of something you might want to start with, something that might seem approachable, engageable, and the simple striating or marking, a nice repetitive task, or the shading, a more interpretive, just thing to fall into and let it unfold. It could help, depending on the size of your paper, or just context of how you're drawing, to mark out a place to work, like a frame, or just use the edges of the paper if it's accessible. I think I'll just use my edges here, even if it's a big area. And keep a pencil and then another pen handy. I want to change intensity or density there. But as we prepare to enter in, just taking a few moments to set the body in a place of relaxed engagement. Do a little scan from the tip of your head down through to the toes as you breathe at a regular but relaxed pace. Notice if there's any tension in the eyeballs or around the ears. Move down through into the neck, the shoulders, anywhere you feel anything that might be tense or just noticeable. Just move it around a little bit as you keep moving down through the scan. Take a deep breath if something's really stubbornly engaged. Little rise and fall of the shoulders down through the arms and into the fingertips. A little side to side or movement of the rib cage, a little front and back, just to make sure everything there is loose and set. The spine can be supported but relaxed. Maybe a little wiggle in the hips, twist or sway side to side. Let them settle in to a space, present, and engage to support that whole upper chain. And with a couple of deep breaths moving down through the legs. If you're sitting, noticing your seat support, moving the mind past the edge of the seat and through the transition from upper leg to lower leg. And as the breath trickles down all the way to the feet, giving some attention to their engagement. Maybe they're dangling, maybe they're sitting firm. If you're standing, all the support they're bringing through the body. Press and wiggle the toes a little bit, maybe lift them up. Take one last nice inhale. And as you exhale, open, see and notice the page, engage with the instrument you'd like to draw with. Bring to mind the character of edge that you'll start with. For me, I'm going to work with more organic shapes, but that have variation. smooth curves and wiggly, bumpy edges along the way. And as you feel ready, eyes open or closed, and sometimes it's easier just to make that first mark, the eyes out of the picture. Take a breath to settle and bring the pen or pencil down and engage that first action. Marking out some territory is different than the other, whether that's inside and outside or towards the outside and to the rest. Depending on where you make that first shape, we'll add a few more just to map out this territory of the paper. So where this one is, you might pick up reciprocal edges, counter edges, somewhere working out to in or in to out, several isolated zones or things that speak in concert are all open to you. And you're ready for the next mark. Taking a breath in, setting the whole body present to making that mark. And as you exhale, following the pen around. Do this a few times, but you can move at your pace, just following through those pacings, letting the eye observe through the hand, feel out where things are, picking a place of engagement, and breathing, and moving the pen or pencil along. Internal shapes, external shapes, a combination of the two, bridges between anything that physically connects space and separates one from another. Guided by that breath, and play it out through the engaging action of exhalation. We should have a pretty good map of things. You can always add more as we work through things in the drawing, and wherever you have now is a place to start. Depending on what tool you're using, you may already notice that edges have different characteristics. Some, in my case, where the pen was more engaged, being a very fine pen, bring strong, darker lines, and where the pen was more angled or moved more quickly, light, almost fluttery lines. With the eyes scanning, noticing those differences, pick some place you're drawn to, and we'll begin there with the engagement of that edge. If that is a hard, crisp edge, maybe that's a place where one thing rounds dramatically to the backside that we don't see. And that engagement could be something like just drawing the roundness, folding a line up in a direction and curving it back onto the surface. They could go far or stay near. That's something that can adjust over time. If that line is soft, maybe it's the diving of one surface into another, somewhere defined, but not quite. That may be a place of lightly contouring, feathering it out on two sides by repeating loosely the geometry of the edge, letting it slowly dissipate to the surfaces in either direction. If something is sharp, crisp, not too heavy, not too light, perhaps that's like a chip in a flint, depression in the surface, well defined somewhere, crisply cutting off with a bit of a sharp edge, then we can bring character to through pulling its flatness into the drawing with a series of striations or lines to keep that edge crisp, and experimenting whether they come from the edge or work their way to the edge, one a little softer and more pronounced, one a little more internal, and playing throughout the drawing. You can stick in one area or another, because as we draw along, we'll mostly just making marks of one sort or another. So the edges you choose to engage with will be all fine. With the survey done, the eyes mapping, the mind matching to things, you might find yourself drawn one place or another and sink into that with the next few rounds of engaging with the breath, taking those marks slow and with purpose to each one, that being the only thing here for a little while. So wherever you find the place, take a breath before you begin each mark, giving some air to the space inside, and then exhaling that air back to the space around the drawing. Taking that at your pace, the first few in to find a place, out to mark that place into existence on the drawing. In to be present with the moment, and out to become part of that action. Working around an area, really just being with it in whichever technique, exploring and deploying there, breath guiding each new moment a chance to calibrate, to make each place its own condition. The eyes, guides to the neighbors, steady, replenishing with each cycle. Taking your time to explore the character that emerges as one line grows out into surface. And as you move around the pieces, that evenness of pacing, giving you time to notice when a change happens. Maybe one heavy edge becomes a light, feathery one, and slowly shifting the way you express it. But working on that discipline of doing it one breath at a time. They don't need to be deep, strong breaths, just present, guiding breaths. Trying not to get too fast. So you have that space to think about what is seen or what could be seen on the paper. But every once in a while, it's easy once something begins to dive in and get away from ourselves. And then noticing where you are in a cycle of breath, taking that as a cue to stabilize and retrack just to the mark, not to the hole at first. We might not get very far in the slow, deliberate presence finding. That leaves a lot of territory open to play in as we find our rhythm. So plenty of time to get there. No rush. And do a little bit more, couple more breaths of the deeper cycle, noticing what you're drawn to, noticing what you are drawing out. And then letting that time of attention, of presence there, open up and free from the slow attention to now the mind running a little bit, the hand playing a little bit, not necessarily fast or slow, but free to engage at the speed that the imagination inspires. And if nothing's standing out right away, stay on the course of simple, repetitive motion, slowly marking out extension of an edge out into the space around, playing exaggeration, playing with curve, line, filling in some little details, texture, of layering, shading around things, and noticing the emergence of new edges potentially, things that leak out into the open space, or the transitions from one type of curve and edge to another. The eye sees things, or the hand gently finds things. And maybe as you work around the drawing, you start to bring a little observation to what you're finding. Simple qualities of edge, soft or hard, fast or slow, light or heavy, and everywhere in between. Maybe some types of edges in whatever figure or forms emerge for you on the drawing are more interesting to your moment, to your observing and seeing now. Then draw into those. The other areas, light and open, provide a bit of the contrast to see the edges that have difference, that bring hierarchy and intensity to something, that are just waiting till their time of forming takes place. Draw into what draws the mind. And depending on the size, the page you've got working there, some stuff might get a little full, a little crowded. So other places to move into, refining detail, adding edge to edge, bring things into the space surface. texture. Or if you have a pencil or something heavy to work with in there, you might bring some shading into play. Let things fill in foreground and background. Define lines of edge, becoming the border to an area of what is behind. We think to the inspiration of the O'Keeffe painting, sky, clouds, but maybe we just work with the tool and light and dark. Pen, crisp line, light pencil, sharp at the edge, be offset by a little bit of blur, fuzz, transition to the darkness beyond, where the white of the page pops surface from its surroundings. And you can play with the other tools or mediums, or stick with whatever you began with, and take the next 5 minutes to find what is happening there in the drawing, what takes place on one side or the other of the edge, whatever you can see and imagine. You explore and imagine. Keep one eye slightly trained, figuratively speaking, to the breath. Just make sure it's happening. If you're working in a few different mediums, say pen and pencil, charcoal, colored pencil, crayon, something else that brings contrast of the texture to the line, to the surface or the shade, there you might notice places where edges become less clearly defined. The pen can look like pencil, or pencil can bring texture to the pen. Using the space of the drawing for a little meditation on that conditioned edge, not always crisp and clearly defined. Sometimes one place leaking into another, mixing, creating something new and in between. The light spilling over a surface, gradually fading it into the darkness. Shadow carried around a feature, softening it, bringing new figures out. But this playground, this territory, forming from a few edges placed around the paper, may be a reflection of our way of seeing, individual way of noticing and engaging with that empty space of the page. Brings with it composition of some kind, a figuration of territory separated by edges. Our engagement with that defines its relationship of hard and soft, in and out, here and there, something foreground with detail, texture, materiality, surface, something background, holding the space of what we see, letting the eye find difference and variety, engaging the mind as it tries to work through and make sense out of what it sees, something abstract, slowly drifting towards a place of recognition, all these little techniques we found over centuries of drawing, searching through that space of expression, can come together in many ways, infinite ways, to express anew what flows through us all the time, the matching of patterns, the searching for things. Just a simple condition found everywhere. Edge, transition, separation, threshold. Change. And our noticing of those moments. As we approach towards the end of the exercise, another transition from absorption and attention here in a close place, a practice, exercising, that noticing through play, through the mind. We can bring our attention to how we transition. Perhaps you want to do it slowly and keep going, keep drawing, keep playing in the space. Let that take you there, or perhaps you have other things on the schedule, other things in time. And so we can define the edge as we leave the exercise. Set down the pen or pencil, place the hands in a comfortable, neutral position. Breathe back into our space around us, noticing the filling out, arising and falling, noticing our own boundary perceptively to the space, and making that moment of choice of finished, on to the next. As you come back and prepare for the rest of your day. And as we come back to a wider presence in our environment after the narrow, focused presence of an engagement like drawing, you notice that my hand is still warm and engaged. My mind is interested in continuing to explore and finish. And so I think I'll jump back in for a little while, just take it to a conclusion for 10 or 15 more minutes. But that's good to notice for yourself. Do you, one, have the time? Hopefully you can give yourself a few minutes to do an exercise in creative expression and mindfulness together. It's a little bit efficient. But if not, we can always come back around later a little bit each day, a re-engagement, a taking off from where things were and exploring where they could go. So we have to bring our pencils to a rest, take that moment of breath to bring completeness to the space, to let it all sink in and through us. And then approach that threshold or transition, the moving to something else with our own presence and engagement, a mindfulness of where we are and what we are doing. And see if you can't take that with you out to whatever you do throughout your day. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, let me know. Leave a comment about what you found in your exploration of edge and threshold. Share with some friends and subscribe for more videos, usually every Wednesday. Sometimes get a little delayed with the rest of the work I do. But something always comes, something new to explore, something that slowly builds our repertoire of technique, of seeing, of experiencing the act of mindful drawing. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, and draw well.